Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb Bue and Mark Gilbert.
Hi, everybody. So what if your mind is just a collection of thoughts, is more than just a collection of thoughts? What if it's a gateway to a whole new way of living? So we want to welcome you to Conversations in Mind. I'm Barb Bue, and this is my friend and fellow minister, Mark Gilbert. And we're seeking to demystify the study of new thought and dive into the science and soul of consciousness. So whether you're a longtime seeker or curious about the power of your own perspective, we're interested in getting into this thing called mind. Today we thought we would actually just start off our second show with the topic of how do we stay spiritual in the craziness of the world? Or I guess, how do we stay feeling spiritual? We are spiritual, period, end of story. But so, hi, Mark.
Hi, Barb.
You want to, you said you had some thoughts a little bit about what is spiritual.
Yeah. You know, it's like,
off with sort of defining that.
It's one of those things that when we have a topic like, how do we stay spiritual or use our spirituality in the crazy world? It raises the question, what do we mean by a crazy world? And that may be self-evident in the sense that of all of the political divisiveness, the news of the day, and all of the craziness that's going on in the world. And I know that if you're like me, so many of my friends, whenever we get together, we talk about things, and a lot of the conversations veers into the political world, the arena of what's going on in the world. How do we cope with it? How do we deal with it? So, and I know that our purpose here is not necessarily to talk political stuff in this show. It's not to give political opinions per se, although I'm sure that may we may taste on that at some point. But it's to recognize that those events have this sort of weighing upon our consciousness and our outlook on life. And so what I think we want to really get into is how does the spirituality or our spiritual nature support us in our reactions to what we view as a crazy world going on out there. So that to the question of what do we mean by spirituality, for many people, it may just simply be the religion of their choice and how they go to church, they have a certain faith, a certain dogma that supports their lives. And I know that you and I, as being science of mind and new thought ministers, we certainly have a belief system that supports our life. But when we broaden the topic of spirituality and how spirituality can support us in dealing with what's going on in the world, I think in the broadest format of the word spirituality, it has to encompass all aspects of it, whether you're, a fundamentalist Christian, to a Buddhist, to a Hindu, to a Muslim, to New Thought, to whatever your faith is, even if you're a spiritual but not religious person, which, even I think most New Thoughters describe themselves that way, there has to be this body of spirituality. And so what do we mean by spirituality? And if I wanted to put it in a sort of a very quick definition, it would be that when we turn away from the material world, to a transcendent world, that we have some beliefs or ideas about that transcendent nature. As I often talk about with friends of mine, do you believe that there's more than just the physical world? And if you do, what you believe about that world beyond the physical world is, I would call that your spiritual beliefs. And so I'm putting it in the broadest context. Now, obviously, I think our answers might, and some of the ways we describe reacting to worldly events, are going to be flavored, obviously, by our new thought mindset. But that's my sort of very quick spirituality is dealing with the non-material realm of existence. How would you put it?
In the simple version for me is that my spirituality is that which lives within me that calls me to something greater than myself and calls me to be connected with something greater than myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and finding goodness in all of that. in some way. Actually, that's not true. Not finding goodness. Really, it's that which keeps me. It is that which connects me to something greater. And even if I can't define that, I tend to think of it more as mystery these days than as God. There is great mystery out there in this universe, and that lends me to a place that brings me back to my center and back to a heart space that is filled by that when I allow it and make room for it.
Yeah, I could certainly go with that definition as well, and I can narrow my definition down a little bit. I'm not going to, but
you don't need to.
But I do know that when I talk with people of a broad perspective, I try to say, well, okay. In fact, I would even include that sometimes I talk with my materialistic secular friends who don't believe in a non-material existence. And to me, and what I often say to them is, okay, that's your spiritual belief. So if you're looking at physical life as the only thing that exists, then from you, the ultimate question or answer to the big questions of life or ultimate reality, or how spirituality is how we answer those questions. For materialistic, maybe this is all there is and there's nothing out beyond it. But I think for most people who see or sense a life beyond the material, that's where we then get into, well, how does that life support us? So I think anybody watching this, I would invite them to think about their ultimate meaning of life and how their thoughts about that ultimate meaning of life can guide them in dealing with the craziness we're exhibiting in the world.
Yeah, when I talk to people who are more materialistic, it's I don't remember where I read this. I'm sure that I got it from somebody, but this idea that when you walk out to the end of a pier, you're standing on the pier and you're standing at the lake or you're standing on the body of water. Out beyond the pier, there is still a lot of unknown and mystery, and that is what I would call the spiritual realm in many ways. Like, that where goodness and mystery and right now, I would say that the spiritual realm is the place that's a little softer than the material realm, hopefully, and that's definitely more probably new thought than a spiritual path that's more rules based and has a defined structure around it. I wouldn't call us rules based particularly in those ways. Although we do have some, which is part of how dealing with the craziness, what I would call the craziness of the world. But back from that, interesting though, if you read history or you read even not that long ago history in the United States, almost everyone has thought they lived in a crazy time. I mean, really, it's true because everything changes. And I don't know why it is that we think that things are not going to change, but we sort of relax more when things aren't changing, even though they're always changing. I think that part of the dealing with the craziness of the world right now is recognition of how inundated we are with it.
All right.
I mean, not that long ago, to find out what was going on we're both in Colorado if you're listening from elsewhere, but to find out what was going on in Washington, D.C., we had to wait for the nightly news or the newspaper the next morning. And now it is a 24/7 onslaught of opinion. And, and news used to be more factual. It feels like it was just a reporting of what happened. Things are a lot more opinionated now, and maybe they were then, and I just didn't know. But I think the first thing to talk about in dealing with what is going on is creating some space for ourselves to lean back into our spiritual practice and our centeredness or centeringness in order to deal with it.
Right. Right. There's an immediate feeling like sometimes like you have to react immediately. And I think what you're getting at there is that spirituality calls us to be in the silence, to take a moment between stimulus and response and build that gap in there where we can consciously choose how we're going to react to things. There's, oftentimes something positive or negative happens. Positive, we like it. Negative, we don't. We immediately react one way or the other in regards to it. And with so much of the craziness that's going on in the world, and it has that sort of negative impact on us, is to take a breath and to say, okay, what is the highest reaction that I can have in this moment? If I am dealing and anchored in a conscious awareness of some transcendent force or energy or God, if you wish to call it that, then how can I bring that love or God energy into this moment? Even if I'm just physically and emotionally reacting to the news of the day. And I think that is an apparent, a very important characteristic for how our spiritual beliefs and teachings can help us in dealing with the craziness.
Yeah, I mean, simply, to put it simply, just to move from reaction to response. But I want to say that I don't believe personally that it is to hide our heads in the sand and not respond, or to hide our heads in the sand and not read the news, or not know what's going on, or pretend to not know what's going on, even though everybody that says they don't know what's going on really does know what's going on. Like, it's impossible not to. But, to take that breath and that pause and that moment, and to become more discerning about how we move it forward. And I don't do this perfectly. There are things that come flying by me on Facebook, and I just want to repost them, right? And join in the chorus of, because Facebook is now a chorus, right? You have a chorus that believes what you believe. I have a chorus that believes what I believe. We all have a chorus that's been divided very carefully into the people that we already agree with for the most part. So, it feels like we've done something to do that. And I think that's not helping. I mean, and I'm speaking to myself here, like it's probably not helping me very much, except for this moment that I get to feel like righteous. But I'm not sure it's changing the discourse or the temperature.
Yeah, and in some cases it may even be elevating it, because as we stay in our bubbles and respond to those who are within our bubbles, we can self-reinforce our beliefs and continue the dialogue with like-minded people that we're right and they're wrong, and that ends up dividing us even more. There is one point I think you made a moment ago that I want to also come back to, and that's the cyclic nature of things. And I think that we can all agree that there were times, I lived through the 60s, and I remember how tumultuous they were back then. And I would say this, in a sense, is like that. Sometimes I think on steroids, but maybe it's because I'm older and experienced that more as a teenager. But as you listen to historians, there's always been these patterns of ups and downs. And as I tie that to spiritual concepts that I know that we look at, is that there's always a waxing and waning of life. That we're spiritual beings moving through this human experience. The human experience has certain energetic flows to it. One of the energetic flows is the energy of contrast, that our life moves upwards to things that we judge good, and then it moves downward into things that we judge as less than good. And it's often said that it's the creation of that contrast between the two, the good and the bad, however you want to phrase them, that gives us that difference that allows us to really enjoy the ups and to understand the pains and sorrows of the down. So as these spiritual beings experiencing this human life, there is actually at some higher level of value in going through the good and the bad, because the negative aspects of life often give us wisdom and tools and experiences that allow us to reflect upon in our distance from them and see how they served us. And I think at an individual level, we can all acknowledge that we've all gone through death, divorce, job loss, you name it, some sort of negative thing, that when we were in the midst of it, it was the most painful thing that we could experience. And then as we move on through it and we get beyond it with time and distance, most of us look back on those events and say, who I am today is driven by those negative events as well as the positive. Now, if we all individually can assess that and see that, then what about the fact that perhaps at a collective level of all of these individual pockets of humanity going through these ups and downs in their individual lives, maybe there's something collectively that we're moving through as well. And that's sort of like a pendulum shift where we see the consciousness of the planet move one direction and then it moves back to the other. I tend to be politically progressive. I like to see things that are moving us in a direction where there's creates a world that works for all, as we like to say, but it's representing that we're all valuable people and it's all about creating a world where everybody can thrive, not only meet their basic needs, but thrive and bring their special gifts and talents to the planet. And and it seems as we were moving in that direction, and now it seems as if we're contracting and taking it away. And I have to hold the hope, and this is where my spiritual nature comes in, is to say, well, if it's a part of the natural flow, it's only natural that sometimes when we have the spurts of growth in the direction that we desire, that sometimes there's a contraction that takes us away from it, and we can push through this and hopefully come out on the other side and learn and grow from it, and maybe then take it to even higher levels.
See, and I have to say, like, I agree, and then a bit not at the same time, because I think what part of what we're seeing right now is that a whole bunch of us thought we were doing that, thought we were moving, that things were good, thought that things were easy, that they were easeful, that things were getting better. There's a whole segment of the population of the United States that wasn't having that experience, and that we were not aware of. Like the blanket got pulled back from all of that, and we have yet to step into a vision of a world that really does work without wanting to just cover all that back up again and make it go away so we don't have to deal with it. And I think that we are in the middle of, and this is very US centric, we are in the middle of a spiritual reckoning with our history, with our privilege, with now the privilege of people who are heavily more wealthy than we are. And, other countries went through this. France cut people's heads off who got too privileged, right? Like, but I think we're in the midst of this uncovering and kind of at that place. It feels like to me we're at the place where we're going to move forward as a better place and a better country, or we're going to continue to retract and become more segregated, meaner, and more racist in our behavior, and privileged in our behavior until it comes up again, because this is not going to go away until we fix it.
Right.
Right. But we're fixing it from the place of of admiring our history and and thinking that, well, if we just make it the way it was before, in the 50s, we didn't have any of this. Right. In the 50s, there was a whole host of other things. Right. And so I just think we're evolving. We've always evolved. The human species has always evolved. Right. And usually in slow, painful, call it stupid ways. We're not good at it. We're still not good at it. We're not able to go, what? We've been treating this group of people like crap for 200 years. Maybe we should fix that. And let's solve this puzzle. We don't do that. We throw all the puzzle pieces in the air and step on them and take them away from each other. And
I don't think by any nature that we got where we wanted to be. I think we were making strides in it, and now
in the 60s we were, for sure. Yeah. And then we retracted again. And I don't know that I understand the retraction on the collective level. Most of us in our personal experiences, when we go through hardship, we come through with something. You were talking about. We come through with some greater understanding or some greater way of being or better way of being. Hopefully, maybe not. Maybe I'm generalizing with my bubble of people who I try to learn from their mistakes.
I think to a degree we did. I can look back and see a lot of progress that we were making in inroads of treating people more equitably, and now we tend to be sliding back. We could vote, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, things of that nature. A lot of the changes. When I was going through, I came through segregated schools in the South when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And we've not slipped back on that. There's areas where I look at it and I'm discouraged by the slippage of our moving towards what we see are the ideals of this country, and to backslide is it's almost like we take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and the net gain is maybe a step, but because we tasted that extra ways of possibly bringing it about in life, the slip back is so painful because we sort of experienced the goodness of what can be birthed onto this planet. One other thing that I think that is consideration, when we look at our spiritual beliefs, is the idea of the shadow. And I know we teach that a lot in the our Science of Mind classes, and I truly believe that it is an aspect of our spirituality is to recognize that as we start out in wholeness of the God or divine within New Thought, that there are separations that occur as we move away from spirit. And one of the first separations is that we make a distinction between myself and the rest of the world. That there's the internal awareness, the subjective awareness, and the outer so-called objective world. We make that very distinction. And then we start making a distinction between our minds and our bodies. And so when we do that, we sort of disown our bodies to a degree and identify with our thoughts and minds. And then we narrow it even further by dissociating parts of our mind. We call it the shadow, and we have a persona. So
we make it bad and we push it away.
Yes. And so every step and this is something I borrowed from Ken Wilber and his spectrum of consciousness work from so many years ago. But it's basically the idea that as we move away from spirit or oneness, we keep dividing ourselves up and up until and one of the key parts of coming back to wholeness is to heal our shadow, is to take what's in our shadow aspect and meld it back with those aspects of our persona that we can claim easily. By melding our shadow and our persona, we can come to a state of wholeness to bring back and meld our mind and body, and beyond that, to bring back and meld our objective and subjective into a state of oneness and non-duality. Well, as we're moving back into wholeness, at some point, we have to heal the shadow. And I bring this up because one of the things that America has never really, truly taken ownership on is healing the shadow over slavery and racism in this country. And although we made great strides with the Civil War and certain legal acts, but we slipped back with Jim Crow laws and segregation. We made forward progress with a number of things in the 60s. And as we've been talking about in the last few minutes, sliding back on a lot of that, at least in people's words and actions of trying to retract some of the forward thinking and advances. And so I think healing the shadow is something that we have a collective shadow, and it's exhibiting itself, I think, in a lot of the craziness and the one-sided.
And if you think about it, as you're talking, I'm thinking, we fixed laws. We did not fix hearts and minds.
Right.
And fixing the laws definitely needed to happen and probably to happen first, because it started to change it started to change belief and hearts and minds, but we're not there yet. Apparently we're not there yet. And a lot of us thought we were a lot further along than we really are, and even those of us, I think even for me, for instance, as all these things have happened since George Floyd died, there's new awareness that, I thought I was pretty good in all of this. And I've learned a whole lot more, and undone a whole lot more and learned a whole lot more and continue to learn, or try to continue to learn. And I think that that's the thing that will ultimately move us forward, is if people get curious. And people are able to ask questions of themselves, and unfortunately, I think that, we were referring earlier to spiritual paths that here's the rules and here's the box. I think what happens in that box is that if you question one thing, you feel like you have to question everything, and people don't want to question everything. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, because then they end up being religious scientists or something like that. And, you know, because those of us that had got here pretty much questioned everything at some point in our lives, right? We had to, and many of us were forced to for whatever reason. You know, I mean, something happened in our life that went, well, this isn't real. So what is, you know? And then we're forced to look at those things. And so I think it's really hard when your whole life is built on a faith system that tells you if you question anything, that you're questioning everything. And that doesn't necessarily have to be true.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Hold that thought. We're going to take a very quick break here and promote the New Thought Media Network. We're happy you're with us, but we hope that you support this network and listen to these brief words.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about what is all messed up and what is causing craziness and what is the craziness and how our lives are inundated with it. How do we deal? You know, how do you deal? How are you dealing with, I know that you are very politically aware and you're news aware and all those things. How are you dealing?
You know, if I had to break it down into some key points, one is I watch less political news. I stay informed, but not inundated in it. I used to watch a lot of these political argument kind of things, and that only, raised my ire. And so now I stay informed. I know what's going on. Secondly, but I don't just immerse myself in it. Secondly, I look for those opportunities for me to raise my voice. You know, there's been times I've written my congressional people and made a point about something I wanted them to take action on. I've gone to rallies I've got my sign that I've made that I go and stand out on street corners. If I can't do that when I'm going by, I'll honk at them in support. But so I try to attend the rallies and things to show that they're, and I want to say that's a valid thing for me, because even if I'm not able to go, just watching the fact that people are going out and taking the time to say, this is not right. This is not right. It shows that there are people out there who are upset, and that you're not alone in the angst that you're feeling over the world. And so, those are sort of like and then I speak out in individual conversations. I'll freely share my political beliefs with folks and things I think that need to occur. And I think actions like even doing this show, in a way, are part of that support of trying to be proactive in creating a better world. So I have my worldly events that I do, but I also have to things where I look beyond the world of form and the world of this material existence and say, what is it that I can tap into in the transcendent aspect of oneness that gives me guidance and support in this? I have to look at that's where I get into the ideas of looking at the waxing and wanings of time, to know that our truth is in God or spirit or oneness, that we are all on this human journey, that we're individually experiencing this collective trip that we're all doing together. And that the politics are just an expression of this, that it's a way in which God or the divine is experiencing life. And so my individual beliefs about spirit and oneness, and the fact that we all exist for the divine, the bliss of the divine, is how Aurobindo liked to say it, is that even these things that are less than what we desire are at some higher and greater level, is serving some greater transcendent need as we evolve back into remembering our truth. The key here is that I've seen some people who move only into transcendence and oneness states to use that as a spiritual bypass for moving back into the world of form, we've got to keep in mind that it's not an either or. We're not only transcendent oneness, but that oneness incorporates this world of form and the evolutionary arc of and journey we're going on through in materialism. This materialistic life is part of that oneness, but our ultimate truth transcends it. If we can go, some people want to go and stay in meditative states, live in oneness. I'm seeing this from a higher vibratory level, and they use that as an excuse not to come back into the world of form and say, what's mine to do and be in this world?
Right.
And what we have to do is to bring them together, bring the awareness of oneness and the ultimate good of all back into the actions that we're called to do and be in the world, and not use it as a means to not play in calling out those things that are incorrect. I think that's some of the key things, Barb. What about you?
I guess it's shifted. I think I've gotten a little calmer since the beginning of the year in some ways. Like I realized, I was really caught. I was really in it and spending a lot of time in it, and a lot of time in the argument and not really the argument, like re-arguing things to my stream of people who already agree with me, right? Like, which is just a waste of good energy. And so, as I was doing some work around the beginning of the year and what this year for me, one part of my phrase for the year is fiercely aligned. And for me, what that means is aligned with what I believe to be true, which is that we are moving forward in some way, that there is over on the other side of this chaos is a world that works. On the other side of this chaos is equity and inclusion and peace, just peace. And that on the other side of this mess, people will get tired of fighting each other and will come together, and smart people will find real solutions to real problems. Because when I look at the problems, like people are hungry, that's a systems problem, not a source problem. Like we have enough supply, we don't have enough sharing of resources. And most of it comes down to that in many ways. Is there enough housing? Probably, but we've priced it out of too many people's range. We've underpaid people. We're doing all these things. But I do believe that on the other side of it is this greater expression of us as humanity and as human beings. And I think that when I look back at history, that has always been true. Like as much as I think, as much as I want to think right now that we're sort of crappy people, we were way crappier people 200 years ago, like, and 400 years ago and 1,000 years ago. We've always been very tribal, and I don't understand that. But I think part of this fiercely aligned is understanding that we will be moving from small tribe to large tribe thinking at some point. It might not be in my lifetime, but what I know is that I can lend my voice to making it better in my lifetime. Yeah. And hopefully then better in my niece's lifetime and in her kids' your grandkids, all of the thing. We all want their lives to be better, right? But I think that for a lot of our history, particularly here in the United States, better meant more material things. Bigger houses, more stuff, more boats, more all the things, right? And I think that's changing in the couple of generations behind us. Mm-hmm. They want more community and more connection, and because connection was sort of taken away from them in so many ways, that they're trying to learn how to do that again in a different way. And I think we'll be better for that. And we are less violent than we used to be.
Yeah. There was a social scientist, I think, who wrote a book a few years back about studying the numbers of people killed violently in war and tracking the fact that, at least through the second half of the 20th century and early into this one, we were on a downward track, that fewer and fewer people were being killed in that. There's something I was hearing the other day, though, that said for the last 10 or 15 years, maybe, that we've been on an uptick on war deaths, which is a negative thing. But I'm hoping it's just like stock market charts where things temporarily shift in the other direction before, moving in the direction that we want them to go. And
Yeah.
so,
I wasn't thinking so much global like that. I was thinking more about parenting, actually.
mhm.
I think parenting has become less violent.
Yeah.
When I look at when I talk to people in my age group, my friends, most of our parents hit us,
Yeah.
and that was normal. And that's not as normal anymore. And kids are growing up with a better sense of who they are and a more confident sense of who they are, um, and parents are doing better parenting.
Mhm.
And I think that is going to make a fundamental change in the way of the world soon.
Yeah, and I like one thing you said a moment ago, and the fact that we tend to be moving towards more of a global perspective. That we tend to look at, it was our tribe, our family, our tribe, our country. And I think right now we're going through the throes of some pressures of country versus world. Are we world centric, or are we ethnocentric towards our country only, or towards our race only, or our political party only? So we have all these isms of things that we sort of limit and define ourselves by race, sex, political beliefs, religious beliefs, etc. But there's this sort of movement towards moving beyond those smaller schisms and into seeing ourselves as, as a global identity. And I think what we're also experiencing is some global growth pains
Oh yeah.
in releasing the old boundaries of how we identified ourselves. Some people are very resistant to seeing themselves, but I know that the media and the immediacy with which you see stuff around the world, and the sense that our heart gets opened by tragedies that occur on the other side of the world, it shows that there is a growing and growing empathy where our moral care and concern circle is expanding to bigger and bigger groups of people. And I have to be optimistic that that's going to win out too, as we seek to create a world that works not only for folks in America, but folks for every other country and every other political belief, race, religion, etc.
It seems like it has to, because once we become more aware, it's sort of natural to become more globally aware, right? Or to stop being so country centric because we're not so white centric or so Colorado centric or whatever it is that we defined ourselves as, right? And so then it becomes about who is my community of people who are support and care and love in my life. But then how does that expand outward instead of putting it in a circle and putting wagons, circling the wagons around it.
Yeah.
And that's, we're moving in those ways. I recently, this kind of reminds me. So I recently took a little 3-week heart math class, and I had done this years ago, and I'd sort of forgotten about it. But there's this coherence thing that you can do, and I've been putting that into play in this last just few weeks, actually, and I'm sort of reminded of it. But it's this, breathing into your heart and saying the words care, appreciation, gratitude, and compassion. Care, appreciation, gratitude, compassion, and it creates a physical coherence in our bodies, but it also creates an outward wave of energy that is kinder, even if we're not feeling kind. If we can stay in this, and that energy bumps up against other people's energy. And so, I'm trying to, when I go out in the world, be aware of my circle of influence in a way that's not about what I say to people, but is about how the energy with which we show up.
Yeah.
And I think that if those of us in the know about these things are able to do more of that, then we will have a rolling impact. I'm going to go, if I go to the march, I'm going to go to the march with heart coherence, not anger.
Yeah.
I do get angry, and I am frustrated, and I do want to, am not avoiding any of the things right now. And I'm furious about the Epstein things and all of that. Like, I just don't even know I don't even know honestly how to process that level of cruelty and disease of the mind, and how women are treated still, and how children are treated, But when I go out, I'm trying to go out with some energy around me that hopefully is bumping into people. And if they're angry, maybe my energy's bumping into their anger and helping a little bit, or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
We really have,
Ernest Holmes used to call that the thought atmosphere that we create around us. And I know that I run into people all the time that they either give off negative energy or positive energy. And for those of us who may want to hear that, what Barb was just describing, and call it woo-woo, I think we've all experienced that, being around people who are loving and people who are very negative and hating, and that there is a feel that you get into their field and you feel it energetically.
Yep.
And I think one of the things we can do in our spiritual reactions to the worldly events is to carry that loving field of energy, to, anchor ourselves in it before we move out into the world, and to then project that energy of love, look for it in other people, and have it ourselves as we interact with other expressions of the one. So that's a great reminder, Barb.
And amplify it in other people if you can, or help them amplify it,
Yeah.
Like, there's enough of that to go around. It's not pie. We don't have to divide it up and just get a slice, right? Like,
right.
I mean,
somebody can wrong you and you have a choice. You can choose to remove yourself from the situation. You can be loving. You can, certainly not put yourself as a victim to any kind of harm.
Yeah, no.
But certainly, if there's a situation where it calls forth to it, think of what the most loving response can be. And sometimes that's just walking away. But sometimes it's engaging in a loving way.
Yes. And sometimes it's recognizing when we're caught into things that aren't even going on. I was sitting in this class a couple of weeks ago, and somebody was talking about, they were pulling into the parking lot and someone almost hit them, and they were really angry and like all amped up, and they told the story like 3 times. And in my head, I'm like, nothing actually happened.
Yeah.
Nothing really happened. Right. But we latch onto these things. And these are all reminded in my face, right? A reminder. But we latch onto these things because it's a fun story, or we're mad and we have to get it out of our system in some way. But then when we keep running it through our system and we don't stop and go, well, okay, I'm really grateful that nothing happened.
Right.
Because nobody got hit, nobody got hurt, nobody died today. Like, it just scared me a little. I can acknowledge that I was scared a little. I could tell the story once about being scared a little, maybe try to make a joke. We can change the story into something that's funny about how we reacted instead of reacting.
Yeah. And if that's hard for us, at least learn to curtail rehashing the story with a negative light.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It only takes seconds for all of that to run through our body. And then after that, if it's still in our body, it's because we're thinking about it. And it's a choice that we make in our mind, then not a reaction that's actually in our body. And again, nothing actually happened. And so I think if we could let go right now of the things where nothing really happened, like, that would probably go a long way in helping us to stay more balanced, because it's easy right now to get mad because somebody delivers dinner late. I mean, it is. It's easy to get mad because we're taking all of this other stuff that we're not really processing or dealing with well, and then we're taking it out on the thing that matters the least.
Yeah.
Which is a 5-minute delay, or whatever it is, because this is a tangible thing that we could get angry about, where this, seems out there somewhere.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Let's don't take and redirect our negative emotions about our frustrations over the greater world at large and its craziness, and redirect that into a negative response. It's for something small in our lives.
And at our neighbor, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make the choice of love in every moment that we can. And if we can't, be quiet.
Well, so I know we're going to run low on time here, and maybe this is a whole other show. But
Yeah.
where's the space between loving and accountability?
Yeah.
Because we have to talk about that. Whether you and I have to talk about it, I don't know. But as a country, as a world, we're having to talk about that. This Epstein thing has a lot of accountability that needs to happen. And how do we do that, you know, and not burn all our books by particular authors or, you know, like.
Well, maybe that is a topic for another time, and you and I can chat about that and see if that's something we want to pursue. You know, I know often in my talks with people, when I try to bring a spiritual perspective in, they'll say, well, you're just going to get run over with, or people who are want to cause harm are going to cause harm to you, or you're not holding people accountable for their negative actions, et cetera. You know, and I like to reflect on the fact that if I can bring love to a situation, whether it's a small in my sphere immediately around me, or whether it's big, like dealing with the Epstein files and the pedophilia stuff that seems to be rampant among the wealthy in our country, that I want to bring love to that. But at the same time, I don't want to use that as going back to spiritual bypassing again.
Right.
I'm using my loving energy to not hold people accountable for their actions. I think that the immediate thing we always have to do is in our inner world of our own lives, always have healthy boundaries. If somebody's going to be causing you physical or emotional or verbal harm, you have to stand up for yourself. And in many cases, not only stand up, but remove yourself from the circumstances. You know, you can't be loving and be a doormat at the same time. But when we look into the bigger world of Epstein and so forth, we have to take those same ideas. How can we hold people accountable? What's our role to do here? And
we can very lovingly close the door to the jail cell.
Yes. And it gets back to some of the stuff we were chatting about earlier, taking the appropriate action for what's ours to do, with whether it's political action, going out with signs, looking for, in many cases, I know for myself, it's been joining organizations that support initiatives that I felt an energy to do.
Yeah, I'm trying to be very, very cautious, aware of where I spend my money.
Right.
You know,
and time is, you know, very, very much. You know, I've been members of groups for short periods of time or longer periods of time, and recognized it's at a certain interval, it was mine to support them, and then time to let it go. And it's not to take something on with an eye that I'm going to be a permanent member of that, but something that maybe this is the moment that I need to get involved and support that. Whether it's sending, you know, some money to an organization you support that you know is doing good work, or whether you personally are spending your time and energy getting involved with them. But I think that these are just parts of the range of things that we can do that address our need to address the world of form and stay true to our spiritual principles at the same time.
Yes. And do the take the time to take care of your inner life, you know, and that's really the key thing, is take the time to take care of your inner life so that you can approach the outer life with some energy and resilience and all those things that we need right now, you know, to keep it in balance.
And I think we'll end it there, Barb.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We want to thank you for listening today very much, and invite you on whatever platform you're listening on to leave us some comments and notes, things you'd like us to address or not. And we'll hope you come back next week and listen again.
Thanks. And goodbye, everybody.